President Trump has now announced that he will extend the ceasefire in West Asia. Taking to Truth Social, President Trump has confirmed that the ceasefire will be extended until such a time that a unified proposal from the government of Iran is received by the Trump administration. Now, this has come at a time when President Trump has been saying and talking about, despite when it comes to the second round of talks that were expected to happen in Islamabad, well, that for now has been put on hold. But the naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz on part of U.S. military, however, will continue. And he says that he will continue to exert that kind of pressure on Iran till the time it submits a unified proposal. So let's take a look exactly what President Trump has been saying, that based on the fact that the government of Iran is fractured, and upon request of Field Marshal of Pakistan and their Prime Minister, interestingly that he's taken the name of the Field Marshal before the Prime Minister, he says that we've accepted the request for an extension of ceasefire. And the attack on Iran has now been put on hold. However, till the time that Iran actually submits a unified proposal, and he's directed the military as well to be on standby mode and continue with the blockade. And he says that the extension of the ceasefire is only till the time that a submission of a proposal is done on part of the Iranian side. Iran for now has come back when it comes to its retaliation is concerned, where Iran has now portrayed a US blockade to be piracy and also state terrorism, where Iran's foreign ministry has come out to say that the US naval blockade on Iranian shipping and trade were a serious violation, describing this to be as an act of piracy and state terrorism. Now, first of all, when it comes to the aggression and the maritime shipping and the trading, Iran has now been terming this to be as a dangerous violation. And because if this becomes common, basically when it comes to the maritime freedom of the world will be in danger. And this is something that both Iran has also done and America also continues to do. So there is already a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz that has been imposed by Iran, and then there is another blockade that has now been imposed on part of the US Navy as far as the exit and the entry of access to the Iranian ports, and Iranian ships leaving the ports is something that is now being stopped by the US Navy. So that seems to be the tensions that has been escalating. We talk about when it comes to the situation of the Strait of Hormuz, because here as well President Trump has now issued a warning as he is now defending the naval blockade by the US military. He says that if a deal is not reached and if Iran does not accept the terms and conditions of the US, then the naval blockade will continue. And not just the blockade, President Trump once again has threatened to blow up Iran, not just Iran, but including that of its leadership as well, because President Trump has now said that Iran does not want the Strait of Hormuz to be closed, irrespective that they want that the Strait of Hormuz to be opened, because this is the only way that it can monetize the Strait of Hormuz, and it seems to be losing millions of dollars every day, and this is just an attempt to save face. So what President Trump is now saying, that people have approached me for 4 days ago saying that Iran wants the Strait of Hormuz to be opened immediately. But if we do that, then there can never be a deal with Iran unless we blow up the rest of their country, including with their leaders. So this is something that President Trump has been initiating, saying that the ball now rests in the court of Iran, and they have to come up with the deal if they want the US naval blockade to be removed after this blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Till the time, the Strait of Hormuz will also be blocked and the US naval blockade will also be imposed. Let's connect with Mayank on this. Mayank, good morning. Well, for now, talks are not happening in Islamabad. Ceasefire, yes, but for how long will that continue? That also remains a question mark.
Interesting, actually. In fact, I would use word that it shows some hope, and things are maybe moving in a positive direction, because it is about the details now. What kind of details are being discussed between the both sides, because the proposal is being shifted or being handed over from one side to the other by the Pakistan. In this case, I'm mentioning deliberately military, because it is being led by a uniformed officer, which is Field Marshal Munir. So, it is hopeful and it is positive, because in the sense like there are certain agreements to be made, or there are certain things on which some kind of a discussion is going on between both sides. Because right from the first proposal, which was first meeting on ceasefire or negotiations which started on 11th of April, during that time also both sides had handed over the kind of conditions or the proposals they wanted from each other. And it seems that there is a continuity in that, and both sides are bringing down things to a level wherein it becomes a middle ground for both sides. So it needs to be further discussed, and that is what it is reflecting by the way the ceasefire has been extended.
Yes.
But you have brought out a very pertinent point that Strait of Hormuz has been a strategic tool for initially Iran, and now it has been blockaded by the US Navy in this case.
Yeah.
And in that also they have fired upon a vessel of Iran which was moving from Shanghai to
Yes, I think
so
we're just
it
going
becomes
to talk about
the
in detail, because does it mean that there would be a direct face-off here with China, because there are Chinese interests that lie as far as when it comes to the purchase of Iranian oil is concerned. So what actually America is attempting to do is something that Iran has been doing to the world. Let's in the meantime talk about what Mayank had been mentioning when it comes to nearly 28 ships, as it is now being informed and reported, that have now been turned back by the US Navy. And this attack on the seizure when it comes to this Iranian cargo ship, which was also previously sanctioned under President Trump's first tenure. And Tuska is something that was seized in the Gulf of Oman by the US Navy, and they say that this action was lawful because the ship was trying to evade the blockade. Now, the route is something which is very interesting, because the search operations were launched, and thereafter, before the seizure, the ship was also disabled. But the route that it had undertaken was that it came in from China. It had also docked at Shanghai port. Thereafter, it had moved to Malaysia, and from Malaysia, it was headed to Bandar Abbas, which is an Iranian port. And from there, what we are looking at, because the US naval blockade was in place, well, it decided when it comes to the ship is concerned, it was disabled before its seizure. And this is something that Iranian side has been calling it as piracy and an act of terrorism, and as another attempt to violate the ceasefire on part of the American side. But the Iranian military has now threatened retaliation as well, because you just heard and saw what President Trump has said, that once again he's given the warning that he will blow up Iran, including their leadership. Iran, however, has said that if you come for us, then we're going to retaliate, and even harder now. We are not just going to come against you, but we are going to come against Israel as well, and with full force. So the Iranian military seems to be threatening that their forces would attack American and Israeli targets with full force if they are attacking Iran. And this is now coming in from the Iranian-run state broadcaster, which has now come out with a statement saying that Iran would actually once again teach America and Israel a harsher lesson than before, describing them to be as child killers. Now, this kind of statements are coming in from the Iranian side, because Iran is of the opinion that if you hit us, we'll come back for you even harder.
سخنگوی قرارگاه مرکزی خاتم الانبیا در پی تهدیدهای مکرر رئیس جمهور امریکا و فرماندهان ارتش متجاوز و تروریست این کشور با تأکید بر آمادگی کامل هشدار داد نیروهای مسلح جمهوری اسلامی ایران در صورت تجاوز و هر گونه اقدام علیه ایران اسلامی بلافاصله به اهداف از پیش تعیین شده قدرتمندانه هجوم می‌آورند و به امریکای متجاوز و رژیم کودککش صهیونیستی شدیدتر از قبل درس عبرت دیگری خواهند داد.
Well, let's talk about how the pressure also seems to be building on President Trump, because now he's been giving hints that he wants this war to end soon. So what are those possible reasons? As far as when it comes to the approval ratings are also concerned, President Trump's popularity seems to have taken a hit. There are other reasons as far as the Make America Great Again base is concerned. They also don't seem very convinced as to why United States was in a way forced, or was it influenced by Israel to, take a standing in this war to join the, to launch those joint strikes. Then when it comes to another reason is, of course, the gas prices that have also gone up. This is something that in the long run will affect American citizens, and the Republicans also seem to be in a way divided when it comes to their support to President Trump on carrying out this war with Iran. And there are midterm risks also that seems to be rising for President Trump, because the war could actually hurt his chances in the long run. And another reason is that because they did not expect, but this has been a full-blown retaliation on part of Iran that has taken not just Americans but the world by surprise in the way that they have decided to retaliate, and that too with such force. And the Iranian retaliation risk is something that you just heard coming in from the Iranian side, saying that if you attack us, then we are going to destroy your assets, and the aggressor, which it counts to be both US and Israel. The oil volatility, well, that seems to be the immediate effect that we see across markets, and Brent crude prices as well. We've seen as much as $120 per barrel mark that it had touched. But the volatility is something, Srinjoy, often that we see is when the statements are made. Now that the ceasefire has been announced, do we expect some relief in the stock markets too?
Well, stock market apart, It's the oil price which gets the American. If the oil price has touched $4 a gallon and is heading towards $5, if the oil prices touch $5 a gallon, then there is trouble because very clearly the Americans don't want to pay $5 a gallon, and when they do, they realize that, look, this money could have been spent buying other things, including essentials. Now that is one. Of course, you referred to the midterms, and rightly too. Now, President Trump is not likely to fight another election in his life. But what worries him possibly is the fact that in the midterms, if there is a wipeout, now this is a very distant possibility. It's not likely to happen very easily, because in the Senate, if there are 67 senators against him, 67 out of 100, and that's not going to be easy at all, then the possibility of impeachment is actually very real. Because to impeach a president,
yes,
simple majority, the House is much easier. But in the Senate, because you need both to send a president home, you need 67. Now, are the Democrats going to win 67? Very unlikely. Because in any case, all of the Senate does not go to the polls. But if the Democrats win a substantial number, and a few Republicans, like Susan Collins and people, go against him on an impeachment issue, 67 Democrats.
So basically, very few takers as far as for President Trump's statement there on why did he feel the need to attack Iran in the first place. Was Iran posing to be a direct threat to America, or did it come under the influence of Israel that it started, when it comes to these joint strikes are concerned? That seems to have now taken a hit as far as President Trump's popularity terms are also concerned. Please to stay on with us, Mayank and Srinjoy, because we're going to talk about Pakistan in this case. Well, it must be also taking, a sigh of relief, because it doesn't have to pay up the hotel bills for the second time. It didn't do the first time either. But as the days are now coming in of those mixed signals and mounting threats, the second round of talks remain in limbo. Adding to that uncertainty are comments from President Trump, who says that Washington hopes to reach a great deal to end the war. Iran, however, seems to be holding its ground, refusing any truce under pressure. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance's departure to Islamabad has now been cancelled for now, till the time the second round of negotiations that, however, we don't know when they are expected to happen. So who exactly is the one who's calling the shots in Iran? Because is it the civilian leadership, or is it when it comes to the IRGC? So let's talk about as far as the delegation that was expected to be present for the second round of talks included Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, Ghalibaf, who has been the parliamentary speaker. We are also looking at military corps of the IRGC was also expected, because here, despite when it comes to the ceasefire announcement, there have been strikes on part of Iran as well that has been continuing against Israel. Now, diplomatic channels also de-escalation and formally in charge of negotiations, but on part of the IRGC, we've seen the kind of retaliation and the firing that has taken place at the Strait of Hormuz. So that actually talks about, or does it showcase a different side of the story, a visible rift when it comes to the leadership within Iran? So who exactly is the one who's going to take that final call? Well, as far as Mujtaba Khamenei is also concerned, his whereabouts till date remain unknown. So the divided command, that seems to be a problem here for the Iranian side, but the US forces have, what is now being said according to reports, have boarded an oil tanker previously sanctioned for smuggling Iranian crude oil in Asia, as it is now putting into place a global warning to track down vessels tied to Tehran. Now, this is coming in on part of US Navy, which they have been conducting a right of visit maritime interdiction, and this is now being carried out as far as a certain tanker that was captured. And this seems to be, when it comes to the Iranian military command that we have been talking about, because Iran in a way has come out to also condemn the attack that happened, or the seizure of this ship, which is the Iranian cargo ship that is Tuska. But this seems to be on part of the Iranian side, which has been calling this as an attempt of terrorism and also saying that this is an act of piracy and also violates the ceasefire. So this is something where both sides have been maintaining that there have been violations of ceasefire. But when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, well, that still remains a point of contention that has been continuing on both sides. So the U.S. naval blockade that will still continue, and this is despite when the Strait of Hormuz, we still don't know if it is actually opened or closed. So the United States boarded an oil tanker linked to Iran in the Bay of Bengal, and this is now coming across as another development in this fresh move to enforce its naval blockade. And the Pentagon says that the U.S. forces have carried out what it called as a right of visit maritime interdiction of this vessel, which has been identified as the MT Tiffany, without any incident. And according to the U.S. officials, the ship was carrying Iranian crude and had been previously sanctioned for smuggling oil. So this is the second such action has now been taken up in the recent days. And again, the justification, Srinjoy, coming in from Washington as it steps up efforts to stop any vessels that are linked to Iran.
Yes, this is something the Americans have been doing. The Tiffany happened a while ago, but as you rightly said, it's the second one. First, they actually fired at an Iranian cargo ship. Now they boarded a tanker. This is to keep up the pressure, on Iran, ensure that it cannot really export any oil, and to ensure that Iran is under pressure. This is something the Americans have been doing because they have no other choice at this point. They are not going to go to war. There is already a ceasefire in place. Now, how can you hurt Iran? If you can't go to war, the one option is economic warfare. Now, the blockade naturally is part of the economic warfare efforts. Now, so are these. If you're going to board a tanker, if you're going to fire at a cargo ship that's going to be a blockade runner, that's all economic warfare, really.
But Shinjoy, is this a concern as far as how far is this naval blockade of the U.S. in force, even if such kind of interceptions that take place in the Bay of Bengal? Is that a concern?
Well, it's definitely a concern for Iran because it means its shipping capabilities have been absolutely reduced to almost nothing, because no ship can enter any Iranian port, no ship can leave an Iranian port. Now, the few ships that are here and there, one was coming in and was fired at, another was caught and boarded in the Bay of Bengal, as far away from Iran as possible. So this is a concern for Iran. They also realize this is a pressure tactic. The question is, of course, Iran will say this is piracy and all that.
Yes.
So what is it that Iran will do now?
Well, because Iran has been calling it as an act of terrorism on part of US, but US seems to be doing exactly the same which Iran has been doing as far as when it comes to blockading the Strait of Hormuz, and for the last 40 days or so, it has turned it into an effective weapon. Now, in the meantime, let's also take a look what Srinjoy has been mentioning when it comes to this Iranian cargo vessel that was seized, and this point being Bandar Abbas, that has been the Iranian port where the exit or the entry of any Iran-bound ship or ships that are coming to Iran that have been blockaded by the US Navy, and the ship was said to be en route Bandar Abbas, and this vessel that was seized by the US, and it has now justified its claim as far as saying that the ship was trying to evade the blockade, and multiple of its tankers that were also searched until the time it was disabled and it was dismantled. So on part of the US forces, this seems to be another interception that has now taken place. This is the second Iran-linked ship that seems to have been stopped. And this seems to be on part of the justification by the US side. This too was previously sanctioned to be the one that seems to be smuggling Iranian crude. So Mayank, when we talk about such kind of actions there, will it now further lead to a conflict? Because yes, ceasefire announced, but the tensions still simmer.
Yes, we have to see in what way the Iran is going to evade or come out of this quandary or the dilemma, which because of this naval blockade by the U.S. armed forces, in this case Marines and naval forces, it has been put up in that area. So we have to see in what way. But then as far as capabilities are concerned, that will become a sort of a aggression if military means will be used in order to somehow blockade to remove this blockade. So we have to wait and watch in what way Iran is going to either talk to the US or send a proposal, sort of a proposal which is agreed upon, or let it continue in that way, because it is definitely going to hit, as our colleague Srinjoy has already brought out, it is definitely going to hit Iran in so many ways, because larger pool or larger basket of exports had been the fuel energy, in this case gas and both petroleum products, crude oil and all. So it is definitely going to pinch, and that's what deliberately US is doing actually. They are trying to pinch Iran in such a way that they agree upon what kind of proposals they are giving, or they eke out the maximum out of Iran by pressurizing them or putting them in a situation from which it is difficult to wriggle out. That's what exactly the situation is being developed, because mind it, the second meeting is yet to take place, and before that it should come to a position wherein Iran is ready to, or it becomes a compulsion for Iran also to agree to the kind of conditions which will be proposed by US.
It's all a tactics. Who will agree for a unified proposal? And both sides, however, has been talking about ceasefire violations, and both sides, however, has also declared a decisive victory in this conflict. Thank you very much, Mayank and Srinjoy, for joining us here on the broadcast.